What would you do if you watched a powerful man humiliate someone who could not defend himself? And what if the quiet man being humiliated carried a strength far greater than anyone in that room could imagine? Before we enter the lobby of Great Tech Tower, remember this. Some people hide entire battles behind calm eyes, and some uniforms reveal nothing about the life that came before. What happened that morning exposed a truth everyone had ignored. Watch where you are going. The voice cut across the marble lobby like a strike. Conversation stopped. Footsteps froze. Every head turned toward the janitor kneeling on the floor, scrambling to recover his fallen mop. Water spread over the polished tiles like a broad reflection of shame. Standing above him was Thomas Gray, billionaire and feared CEO, convinced that authority belonged only to men like him. His shoes gleamed under the lobby lights as he glared down at the man on the ground. You did not see me coming. Of course you did not. People like you never look where you are going. Derek Cole rose slowly, composed and steady. His voice was calm. I am sorry, sir. To Thomas he was nobody. A uniform. A name on a badge. It never occurred to him that the man he insulted had once commanded soldiers in places where courage was measured in survival. How long have you been mopping my floors? 2 years. 2 years and you still managed to make a mess bigger than the one you were supposed to clean. A pair of interns exchanged uneasy looks. One whispered, "He is going too far." Derek bent down again, wiping the water in controlled motions. "With respect, sir, I was cleaning the area you directed." Thomas stepped closer. "So now you blame me. You are lucky I do not fire you right here." From the elevator, Clara Gray stepped out and froze. "Dad, what is going on?" Thomas ignored her. "Men like me build this place. Men like you just clean it." The words hit the room with force. Some employees turned away. Clara's face tightened, embarrassed by her father's cruelty. Derek straightened. His voice remained calm but carried a quiet power. "Ladders go both ways, sir. Sometimes the man at the top falls faster than he thinks." The lobby fell silent. Thomas flushed with anger. "Did you just threaten me?" "No, sir. Just a reminder. You are finished here." He motioned sharply for security. Derek collected his tools. As he moved away, his sleeve lifted just enough to reveal a faded tattoo. A winged sword surrounded by numbers. A mark earned only by a select and dangerous brotherhood. He lowered the sleeve, lifted his bucket and walked away with steady steps, leaving behind a lobby full of whispers. No one there understood who he truly was. By the next morning the entire building was buzzing. What had happened in the lobby was no longer simple gossip. It had become a story that traveled from floor to floor. Some employees claimed the janitor had shouted back. Others swore he had thrown down his mop like a movie hero. No matter the version, one point never changed. Thomas Gray had humiliated a man who did not deserve it. In the staff lounge, groups of employees whispered over their coffee. "I have never seen anyone stand so still while the boss yelled like that." He did not even flinch. It was like he had faced worse. Clara Gray stood nearby pretending to read her tablet, but she absorbed every word. She had replayed the moment all night. Her father's rage. Derek's calm posture. And the tattoo she had glimpsed on his arm. It had not looked decorative. It had looked official. Someone whispered, "He could have lost his job for that." Clara finally spoke. "Or maybe he deserves better than that job." The room fell quiet. People looked down. Meanwhile, in the security control room, Benson, the head of security, reviewed the previous day's footage. He had known Thomas Gray for 10 years, long enough to sense when something felt wrong. Derek's composure bothered him. No fear. No panic. Only control. He rewound the tape. Frame by frame, Derek stood straight while Thomas shouted inches from his face. Then as Derek turned away, Benson paused the video. There it was. The tattoo. He zoomed in. A winged sword marked by a circle of numbers. Benson's chest tightened. He had seen that mark once before on the arm of a man who had saved his unit. The Winged Vanguard. A special forces division so classified that their missions never appeared in official records. He whispered to himself. It cannot be him. He called an old military contact. "Hughes, do you remember a Captain Derek Cole?" A long pause followed, then a low whistle. That man was a ghost. One of the best. Nightfall operations. He saved half an embassy team under fire. Benson swallowed. He is working here as a janitor. What? If that is him, you show him respect. Do not end up on the wrong side of that man. The call ended. Benson stared at the frozen frame on the monitor. Derek's face calm and unreadable. So that is who you are. Across the building, Clara sat at her desk scrolling through images of military insignias. When she saw it, her stomach dropped. The Winged Vanguard Special Forces. The same symbol she had seen on Derek's arm. Why would a man like that be mopping floors? Her phone buzzed with a message from Benson. Miss Gray, your father wants janitorial coverage in the boardroom for the noon investor meeting. Send Cole. Clara hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. Trust me. Something was unfolding and she could feel it building like pressure before a storm. Upstairs, Thomas Gray prepared for the investor meeting. He had already forgotten Derek's name. To him, janitors were interchangeable tools. He assumed the man had quit after the scene in the lobby. Make sure the boardroom looks perfect. While executives gathered and photographers positioned their cameras, Derek Cole quietly pushed his mop bucket down the hall toward the room where everything would soon change. The boardroom gleamed like a chamber of power. Walls of glass framed the skyline while sunlight reflected off the long polished table where investors and defense executives sat in their tailored suits. At the head of the room stood Thomas Gray, wrapped in the confidence he wore like armor. This deal will make Graytech a global name in military defense. Precision, discipline, and control. Values I live by. Approving murmurs filled the air. Every word he spoke fed his ego. Outside the door, wheels rolled softly over the marble floor. Derek Cole pushed his mop bucket into the boardroom with the same calm step he used every day. He moved to the far corner near the panoramic window and began cleaning without attracting attention. No one acknowledged him. No one imagined they should. Thomas continued speaking. We are also in early discussions with our German partners. This partnership will secure our future for the next decade. One of the German delegates, a silver-haired colonel, leaned toward his translator. Their prototype resembles the Vanguard design. Do you remember the one led by Captain Derek Cole? The translator nodded. Yes. The American Special Forces commander. Clara stood near the wall and felt her heart skip. She glanced at Derek. His sleeve slipped slightly as he wiped the floor and the light caught the tattoo on his arm. The winged sword. The same insignia she had seen on her tablet the night before. She looked back at her father, who continued speaking with pride, unaware of the truth sweeping silently through the room. The glass doors opened. Benson, head of security, walked in carrying a thin folder. Sir, I have something that requires your attention. Thomas groaned. Can it wait? I am about to close a deal. It should not. Thomas sighed. Fine. Make it quick. Benson stepped forward. Before you continue, there is something you need to know about the man behind you. Thomas turned with annoyance. What about him? Benson held his gaze. That is not just a janitor. That is Captain Derek Cole, former commanding officer of the United States Winged Vanguard Special Forces. The words echoed across the room. Whispers spread in shock. The German colonel stood up abruptly. Captain Cole, you led Operation Nightfall. You saved 27 of my soldiers. Thomas blinked in disbelief. That is impossible. Benson placed the folder in front of him. I verified this morning. 15 years of service. Multiple commendations. Disappeared from public record 5 years ago. All eyes turned to Derek. He had stopped mopping and now stood straight, hands resting on the handle, gaze steady. Thomas stepped closer, confusion mixing with discomfort. You are that Derek Cole? Derek answered in a calm voice. I was a long time ago. The colonel approached him with deep respect. You are a legend, Captain. My men owe you their lives. Derek shook his head. You owe me nothing, Colonel. We all did what we had to do. Thomas tried to regain control, but his voice trembled. Why would a man like you be cleaning floors? Derek looked him in the eye without hesitation. Because peace does not need an audience, Mr. Gray. My mother became ill and I wanted a quiet life. His answer struck deeper than any speech. It carried a truth Thomas was not prepared to hear. Clara stepped closer, her voice soft. You could have told us who you were. Derek smiled faintly. People only see what they respect. I did not need to tell anyone. Benson folded his arms. Some of us still remember what respect looks like. The colonel nodded. Men like him do not need rank to command it. Thomas swallowed hard. Mr. Coley. Derek raised a hand gently. Do not apologize, sir. You have already shown me who you are. Silence filled the room. Executives shifted uncomfortably. Clara's eyes reflected guilt and admiration at the same time. Derek leaned the mop against the wall. Titles fade. Power shifts. But character is what remains. He turned and walked toward the door. His reflection stretched across the shining floor as he left the boardroom in complete silence. The colonel exhaled slowly. You had greatness cleaning your lobby, Mr. Gray, and you never saw it. Clara looked at her father, who stood frozen, the weight of his actions settling on him with crushing clarity. Sometimes, she said softly, you only see power when it is not wearing a suit. Thomas had no words. His hands trembled slightly. In the hallway, Derek stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, and for the first time the quiet man who had been invisible to everyone was finally seen. Not for the mop he carried, but for the honor he had never left behind. The boardroom remained still after he left. No one dared speak. The silence was heavier than any reprimand. Colonel Vogel broke the silence. In my country, Mr. Gray, a man like that is treated with honor, not humiliation. Thomas lowered his head. I did not know. Benson's voice was firm. You did not care to know. Clara rose from her seat. You talk about leadership every day, but you could not recognize it standing right in front of you. Thomas looked down, guilt spreading across his face. Where did he go? Maintenance exit, sir. He is probably heading home. Thomas grabbed his jacket. Clear my afternoon. He walked out, determined to face the man he had wronged. Outside the tower, the rain had begun to fall in steady lines across the pavement. Derek walked through the parking lot carrying his mop bucket toward the maintenance truck. His uniform was damp, but he did not rush. He had faced storms far worse than this one. A black sedan pulled up beside him. The door opened and Thomas Gray stepped out, his expensive shoes splashing in the puddles. Mr. Cole. Derek turned, his face unreadable. You followed me. Thomas nodded, breath uneven. I had to. I owe you an apology. Derek studied him quietly. You already shared your opinion yesterday. It was clear enough. Thomas lowered his voice. I was wrong. Completely wrong. I judged you by a uniform and by my own pride. Derek answered with calm precision. You judged me because you needed someone beneath you. That is not leadership. That is insecurity. Thomas flinched at the truth. You are right. For a moment neither man spoke. Rain tapped between them like a quiet metronome. Finally Thomas said, I spent my whole life believing respect was something people owed me. But you showed me I have been demanding what I never earned. Derek looked away for a moment. Then maybe it is time to start earning it. Thomas nodded slowly. I want to make this right. A public apology, a donation to veterans, whatever it takes. Derek shook his head gently. Do not do it for me. Do it for the next man you are about to humiliate. Thomas managed a small, humbled smile. You really are a better man than I deserve to know. Derek lifted one shoulder in a faint shrug. I am just a man who cleans up messes. Some are dirtier than floors. For the first time, Thomas let out a quiet laugh at his own expense. He extended a hand. Thank you, Captain. Derek looked at the hand for a moment and then shook it firmly. Take care of your people, Mr. Gray. That is what real command looks like. As Derek turned to leave, the building door opened behind them. Clara stepped out holding an umbrella. She had seen everything. Her father looked at her. I am trying. She nodded. For once I believe you. Together they watched Derek drive away, the rain softening around him. A quiet man leaving behind a lesson the billionaire would never forget. A week later, Graytech Tower looked different. Not because the glass shone brighter or because the floors were cleaner, but because something in the air had changed. Conversations were softer. Faces were kinder. And for the first time in years, the CEO walked through the lobby without the swagger that once defined him. The company was hosting a veterans charity event. Cameras lined the entrance. Banners hung from the rafters. A large section of the atrium was dedicated to honoring service members. At the center stood Thomas Gray, not as the arrogant executive everyone remembered, but as a man learning humility. He adjusted the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, today is not about business. It is about gratitude. It is about remembering that the people we overlook are often the ones holding our world together. The crowd settled. Clara watched from the front row, a faint pride in her eyes. Thomas continued. A few days ago I made a mistake. I disrespected someone who served this country with more courage than I will ever understand. A man named Derek Cole. A quiet stir moved through the audience. Several veterans nodded at the name. He worked here as a janitor. I saw a mop, not a man. What I should have seen was dignity, discipline, and quiet strength. He reminded me that greatness does not shout. It simply stands tall, no matter what uniform it wears. Applause rose across the hall. Thomas gestured toward the back. Mr. Cole, would you join us? Heads turned as Derek entered wearing a simple gray shirt and jeans. No medals. No display. Just a calm presence that commanded respect without asking for it. He walked to the stage shaking a few hands along the way. Thomas extended his hand again, and this time Derek accepted it without hesitation. Thomas spoke. I owe you a public apology. And this company owes you our thanks. Derek nodded once. Apology accepted. But I did nothing special. I only did what decent people should do. Treat others like they matter. A soft murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. Clara stepped forward. Mr. Cole reminded all of us that respect is not earned by title. It is earned by how we treat the people around us. Thomas turned back to the microphone. To honor that lesson, Graytech will fund a new initiative. The Cole Foundation. It will support veterans returning to civilian life. It is time we give back to those who gave everything. Thunderous applause filled the atrium. Cameras flashed, but Derek only nodded with humility in his expression. When the event ended, he stepped outside away from the noise. The city breeze brushed his face. Clara followed him. You did not want the spotlight, did you? Derek smiled faintly. Spotlights are for people trying to look up. I have spent enough of my life looking forward. She laughed softly. You really do talk like a soldier. He turned toward the skyline. I used to think honor was medals and ceremonies. Turns out it is doing the right thing when no one is watching. Clara nodded. Then you have more honor than most. Maybe. But I am still just a janitor. Not to us. As Derek walked toward his truck, a faint smile crossed his face. He did not need applause. He did not need recognition. For the first time in years, he felt seen for who he truly was. Inside Graytech Tower, the atmosphere continued to shift in the days after the event. Employees spoke to one another with a tone that felt different. Softer. More aware. Derek Cole had left a mark on people who had barely noticed him before. Clara often found herself pausing by the lobby windows, staring out at the city while thinking about everything that had unfolded. He really changed this place. She said the words quietly as if speaking only to herself. Her father stood beside her and nodded. He did. And he did it without raising his voice once. Clara steadied him. It is strange. A man with a history like that choosing a life so quiet. Thomas let out a slow breath. Maybe that is the bravest choice he ever made. Throughout the building, conversations continued. I used to walk past him every day. Me too. I never asked his name. Someone replied. I think we all learned something from him. Benson moved through the halls with a presence that felt renewed. He greeted people by name and checked in on teams he had previously ignored. He saw battles none of us can imagine. And he still found a way to stay kind. That is what real strength looks like. One young employee asked quietly, Do you think he will ever come back? Benson smiled. Not as a janitor. But maybe someday as someone this entire company looks up to. In his office, Thomas sat behind his desk for the first time with a sense of self-reflection. He glanced at items he had never paid attention to. A photo of Clara from years ago. An award he once cared about too much. The shadow cast by the window. Had I really lived this blind? He whispered the thought as if admitting a truth. Clara entered the office without knocking. We can do better than this. Starting now. Thomas nodded slowly. We will. Because he showed us how. For a moment they stood in silence, a silence that carried understanding instead of tension. It felt like the beginning of something new. Beyond the glass walls of the Greytech building, the city moved in its usual rhythm. Cars glided through intersections. People hurried along sidewalks. Yet for Derek Cole, life slowed down in a way that felt right. He drove along the quiet road toward his home on the outskirts of town. The window was slightly open and the wind moved through the cabin with a calm hum. Derek kept his eyes on the path ahead, his posture relaxed. He was not searching for recognition. He was not chasing anything. He had already lived enough to know peace was worth more than glory. He parked in front of a modest house with a small garden. A home far from noise. Far from pressure. Far from every burden he once carried. He sat for a moment in silence, then stepped out and walked to the door. Inside the house he removed his jacket and placed it on the chair by the entryway. On a nearby shelf stood a framed photograph of his old unit. Young faces. Determined eyes. A reminder of a life lived with purpose and sacrifice. We made it home. He whispered the words with deep sincerity. A quiet tribute to those who never returned. He prepared a cup of tea and sat by the window. The world outside looked calm. He watched the leaves move with the breeze. For the first time in a long time he felt like he belonged exactly where he was. He did not need applause. He did not need medals. He had chosen peace and peace had finally chosen him back. Meanwhile, inside Greytech Tower, donations to the Cole Foundation began to arrive. Employees contributed what they could. Executives added their support. Partners reached out with offers. It was not about money. It was about honor. A collective gesture to acknowledge the man who had shown them a better way. Clara coordinated the initiative with care. She read messages from veterans who thanked the company for the support. She approved requests. She organized meetings. Every time she saw Derek's name, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for what he had done and for what he had reminded her father to become. Benson continued to move through the building with purpose. This is how it should have always been. He said it softly, as if reminding himself of a truth he had forgotten. In the boardroom, Thomas prepared to sign a document but paused. He set the pen down and reflected on the words Derek had spoken. Titles fade. Power shifts. Character lasts. He let the words settle. How many people have I overlooked? It was a question he needed to ask himself. Thomas stood up, closed the file, and left the office. He wanted to begin again. Not as the leader who demanded respect, but as the leader willing to earn it. Starting with the people he had ignored for too long. It was the beginning of his own transformation. The day slowly shifted into evening as Thomas stepped out of the building. The sky carried tones of amber and gold, and for the first time in years his walk no longer had the heavy stride of a man who believed power came from status. His steps were quieter now. More aware. More human. He crossed the lobby with a calm he had never shown before. He greeted the receptionist. He spoke to members of the cleaning staff he had overlooked for years. Some seemed surprised. Others smiled with genuine warmth. Leadership begins with humility. The thought echoed in his mind as he walked through the doors into the evening air. On the far side of the plaza, an older maintenance worker was cleaning a window. A man Thomas had passed countless times without noticing. This time he approached him. Good evening. Thank you for your work today. The man blinked in surprise, then smiled. Thank you, sir. Have a good night. Thomas continued toward the parking lot with a strange feeling in his chest. Not pride. Not ego. Something simpler. Respect. And the understanding that it was his job to give it first. Meanwhile, in his small home, Derek Cole finished his cup of tea and set it aside. The house was quiet. Peaceful. A sanctuary he had created for himself after years of missions, noise, and danger. He walked to the window and opened it, letting in the cool night air. On a wooden shelf sat a photograph of his old team. Faces from another life. Faces filled with determination and youth. Some of them gone. some of them saved by the choices he had made. We made it home. He spoke the word softly. A promise kept long ago. He looked outside at the street lamps flickering on. No applause. No attention. Only peace. That was enough. Inside Greytech Tower, the coal foundation continued to grow. Messages of gratitude arrived from veterans across the country. Partnerships formed. Donations increased. Not because of publicity, but because a quiet man had reminded an entire company what character looked like. Clara reviewed reports at her desk with a steady sense of purpose. Derek's influence had not faded. It had become a guide for the work ahead. Benson walked the halls with renewed conviction. He ensured every team member felt seen. This is the kind of place he deserved. He whispered it with pride. And in his office, Thomas reflected on every decision that had brought him to this moment. The arrogance he had carried. The man he had overlooked. The lesson he had received. Some people carry greatness in ways you never notice until it is standing right in front of you. He stepped away from his desk and looked out at the city. It is time to be better. The words came out steady and real. Outside, the clouds parted. A soft glow reflected across the pavement as if the world itself was turning a page. Some heroes do not wear medals. Some carry a mop. And some walk through life with a quiet strength that changes others without a single request for recognition. Derek Cole never needed a spotlight. His legacy lived in every person who saw the world differently because of him. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself a small, peaceful smile, knowing the lesson he left behind would last far longer than the echoes of any battlefield.